That was a long day. Jennifer took her clothes off to get a warm shower. She turned the lights off, lit up the aromatic candle and turned on the shower. Mild warm water was touching her skin. It gave her a relief in a way that not only washing the physical pain, but touching the pains that were buried in her mind. The aroma of melting wax gave her a warm, but a spooky sensation. Like, for some unknown reason, it drew a picture of cold stony altar, which had few candles burning on it. Ding, dong, the grandfather clock in her old apartment said it was 11 p.m. in the night. The whole town was in a deadly silence. She came out of the shower and wiped off those droplets that were drooping off from her body. Put her light PJs on. She jumped into her bed, thinking that how comfortable it would be if she could sleep for a really long time. She was really hungry, but was too tired to eat. But if she knew, she wouldn't skip her last meal. She fell into sleep as soon as she jumped into bed, except for some random dogs who howled occasionally. No one was awake in the whole area. The clock struck midnight. Jennifer was suddenly woken up by some unknown force. The window was opened and icy air was everywhere in the room. She saw the curtains of the window fluttering in the cold wind. She was sure that the windows were closed. There were no one else in the apartment, so there was no way that the windows are opened. Bloody wind, she got up from the bed to go and close the window. But all of a sudden, she felt back into bed. It was like she had no strength to get up. She felt like someone or something was holding her to the bed tightly, very tightly. "I want you," she heard a whisper. "I want your blood," whispered again. She tried to get off from bed and run away, but the holding was so tight, so close to her face, a white vapor appeared. And then, it was more likely a skull with spookily long teeth in it. Its eyes were two holes with a dark red flashing light. Jennifer turned her face away and tried to scream, but no sound came out of her mouth. The room started to turn darker, although the moonlight was in the room. The ghost's eyes looked brighter with the room becoming darker. It suddenly flew to the bottom of the bed and started pulling from her legs to get her out of the bed. That touch was so hard and painful. She screamed as hard as she can, but no sound came out of her mouth. "I was looking for you for so long," the spirit whispered. She held the bed's headboard so tightly, but her hands were removed from it by an invisible force. The same force lifted her up from the bed. Her body started to float in the air. The spirit was looking at her from the bottom of the bed with a cruel smile in its vapory face. A random bunch of street dogs started to howl. Jennifer's body was twisted in the air. It was kind of a twist that no one could be alive after it. As I drove along the winding roads near the Akigahara forest in Japan, an eerie sense of dread settled over me like a heavy shroud. The dense trees loomed ominously in the darkness, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers grasping for my soul. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move. As I pressed on, the forest seemed to come alive around me. Strange whispers drifted through the air, carried on the chilly breeze, and shadows danced at the edge of my vision. I tried to ignore the creeping sense of unease, but it gnawed at me like a ravenous beast. Suddenly, my headlights flickered, casting long shadows across the road ahead. I cursed under my breath and reached for the dashboard, but before I could do anything, the lights went out completely, plunging me into darkness. Heart pounding, I slammed on the brakes, but the car continued to coast forward, hurtling towards the edge of the forest. Panic surged through me as I wrestled with the steering wheel, desperately trying to regain control. With a sickening thud, the car lurched to a stop, just inches from the tree line. Shaken but alive, I sat there in the darkness, trying to catch my breath. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the shadows. A figure emerged from the depths of the forest, its form indistinct and twisted, like something out of a nightmare. I froze unable to tear my eyes away as the figure drew closer. Its eyes gleamed with malevolence, and a wicked grin twisted its lips. With a surge of terror, I realized that I was not alone in the darkness, that something sinister lurked in the depths of the Aokigahara forest. Frantically, I fumbled for the door handle, desperate to escape the nightmare that surrounded me. But as I reached for it, a cold hand closed around my wrist. Icy fingers digging into my flesh like talons. With a cry of fear, I wrenched myself free and stumbled out of the car, fleeing into the forest with the unknown entity hot on my heels. Branches tore at my clothes and roots tripped me up at every turn, but still I ran, driven by sheer terror and the instinct to survive. But no matter how fast I ran, the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, its twisted pathways leading me deeper into its heart. And all the while, the whispers grew louder, mocking and taunting me with promises of death and despair. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, I stumbled upon a clearing in the forest, a small glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. But as I stepped into the open space, I realized with horror that I was not alone. Figures surrounded me, their eyes gleaming with hunger and malice. They closed in around me, their whispers rising to a deafening crescendo as they reached out to claim me as their own. With a scream of terror, I fell to my knees, consumed by the darkness that surrounded me. And as the whispers faded into silence, I knew that I was lost to the Aokigahara forest forever. The rain fell in torrents, each droplet pounding against the windshield like tiny fists demanding entry. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a deep, menacing growl that seemed to shake the very earth beneath me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white as I navigated the desolate stretch of highway. It was a night like any other, or so I thought. But as the storm worsened, so did the feeling of unease gnawing at the pit of my stomach. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and the darkness outside seemed to swallow everything in its path. I glanced nervously at the clock, 3:00 a.m. What had possessed me to take this shortcut through the countryside in the dead of night? But it was too late to turn back now. I pressed on, the only sound in the car the steady drumming of rain on the roof. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the road ahead, revealing a figure standing in the middle of the highway. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest as the car skidded to a halt just inches from the mysterious stranger. They stood motionless, shrouded in darkness, their features obscured by the driving rain. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, their eyes gleaming like twin orbs of fire in the night. Without a word, the figure turned and vanished into the storm. My breath caught in my throat as I watched them disappear into the darkness, leaving me alone on the deserted highway. Shaken but determined to press on, I shifted the car into gear and continued my journey. But with each passing mile, the feeling of dread only intensified. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and strange whispers filled the air, mocking and taunting me with every turn of the road. I tried to shake off the sense of foreboding that gripped me, but it clung to me like a shroud, suffocating and oppressive. The storm raged on, relentless in its fury, as if determined to keep me trapped in its grasp forever. And then, just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, I saw it. A dim light flickering in the distance, a beacon of hope cutting through the darkness like a knife. With a surge of adrenaline, I pressed down on the accelerator, desperate to reach safety before it was too late. As I drew closer, I realized with a sinking feeling that the light was coming from an old abandoned farmhouse, its windows shattered and its walls crumbling with age. But it was the only refuge in sight, and I had no choice but to seek shelter within its decaying walls. I parked the car and stumbled out into the storm, my clothes soaked through and my heart pounding in my chest. With trembling hands, I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside, the darkness enveloping me like a suffocating blanket. But as I stood there shivering and alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. And somewhere in the depths of the storm, I knew that whatever had been out there on the highway was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to make the wrong move. It was a chilly autumn evening when Sarah decided to take a solitary drive along the winding back roads of the countryside. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. As she navigated the narrow lanes, the only sounds were the soft hum of her engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Sarah had always found solace in driving alone at night, but tonight felt different. The air seemed thicker, the darkness more oppressive. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed her every move. As she rounded a bend, her headlights caught something in the distance, a figure standing by the side of the road. It was too dark to make out any features, but the silhouette sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She slowed down, her heart pounding in her chest, but as she approached, the figure vanished into the shadows. Brushing it off as her imagination, Sarah continued on her journey, but the feeling of unease lingered, growing stronger with each passing mile. Strange noises echoed in the darkness, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Suddenly, Sarah's headlights flickered, casting the road ahead into darkness. Panicking, she slammed on the brakes, but the car refused to stop. It careened forward, hurtling towards a sharp turn in the road. With a sickening lurch, the car veered off the road and crashed into a tree. Dazed and disoriented, Sarah struggled to regain her bearings. As she stumbled out of the wreckage, she felt a chill run down her spine. In the dim light of the moon, she saw them, a circle of shadowy figures, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. Frozen with fear, Sarah watched as they closed in around her, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. Terrified, she turned and ran, stumbling through the darkness as the shadows pursued her relentlessly. With every step, the whispers grew louder, echoing in her ears until she thought she would go mad. Finally, she emerged onto the main road, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But as she glanced back, she saw them still lurking in the shadows, their eyes fixed on her with hunger and malice. With a scream, Sarah tore down the road, desperate to escape the nightmare that pursued her. But no matter how far she ran, she could never shake the feeling that they were still out there, waiting for her in the darkness, ready to drag her back into the depths of the night.